Hello, esteemed comic book colleagues. This is Dante D bringing you all another video. And today I've done it. I've finally done it. I have finally gotten around to remaking and reposting my very first video that I've ever had on YouTube, and that is super affordable key issues to add to your collection. The values that I was appraising the books at in the original video, I feel are no longer relevant. I was getting a lot of comments from viewers saying that a lot of the values that I was appraising the books at were completely off. And they're right, the video was posted almost 2 years ago. So that's another reason why I wanted to remake this video. I wanted to make it better, and I wanted to update the current market values for a lot of these books. Now, before we get into the video, I really want to say that the values that I'm appraising the books at today are based off of eBay listings. I really kind of considered consulting the Overstreet price guide, but one thing I found in the past is that a lot of times the values that are stated in the Overstreet price guide are not necessarily what the books are going for in the general back issue market. Sometimes the differences in prices in the Overstreet and eBay are vast. So what I've done is I've looked up every single book that I have here today on eBay, and I kind of averaged out what the books are currently going for. I have to say I had a lot of fun researching for this video. I was really kind of astounded to see how much the values of these books have changed in 2 years. Now I have to say some of them have stayed the same, but there are some that have increased significantly in value, and I've actually had to take them off of the list because I no longer consider them to be super affordable. I will show you which books I have taken off the list first, and then we will get into the new list, which I've also made some additions to. Today's video is going to be great for both new comic book collectors and season ones alike, but it is especially going to be great for those new comic book collectors. If you're new to the world of comics, I'm sure that you're finding out by now that back issues can be rather expensive. I'm sure you've been there already, where you get this idea of a comic that you really want in your head, and then you go on eBay to search it because you want to buy it and you're really excited, but then you see that it is super expensive. That can be really discouraging. Trust me, I know, I've been there. But I'm here to tell you today that you don't have to spend a super high amount of money or put holes in your pockets to build a nice comic book collection. You can build a nice comic book collection with some lower priced key issues without breaking the bank. Before we get into the actual list, I want everyone to do a little bit of self-reflection. I want you to take a step back and really ask yourself your reason for collecting comic books. If you're really into comic book collecting because you are expecting to make a profit or you want some financial gain, this may not be the video for you. Although some of the books have increased in value over the past few years, I have to say generally the books that are going to appear in this video today will not go up much in value as a general rule of thumb. You see, I collect more for pop cultural significance. Every single book you're going to see here today is a key issue in some form or another, or they have made a contribution to the comic book medium or pop culture as a whole. So I'm going to shut up now and we will actually get into the list. What I wanted to start off with is the books that appeared in the original video that I'm now taking off the list because they have just increased in value so far beyond the point where I no longer consider them to be super affordable key issues. So let's get to it. Our first book I have here that I'm taking off the list because it has increased in value is Ms. Marvel, number 16, and this is the first cameo appearance of Mystique. Now, in my original video, I had quoted this book at around $50 at the time. That was about 2 years ago. This book now on eBay is going for about $100. I did not find a copy of this book on eBay for under $100. Some of them were even up to $150, $200. Our next book that is being taken off the super affordable list is New Mutants number 87. And this, as most of you probably already know, is the first appearance of Cable. And in my original video, this appeared, and I believe I quoted it for about $50 too at the time, between $50 and $80. This now on eBay, I was very, very surprised, had gone up quite a bit in the $100 to $200 range. So it definitely has gone up quite a bit. Actually, most of the listings that I saw for this book are now in the $200 range. I don't really know what accounted for the rise in value for this book. I think there's been talk of Cable appearing in a movie. I don't know if that's maybe stirring up some speculation on this book, but nevertheless, it has gone up in value and no longer considered to be super affordable by me. Following that book, we have The Amazing Spider-Man, number 361. This is the first appearance of Carnage, who is a rather hot villain. Actually, funny story about this book. The other day, I actually got a comment from a viewer saying, where are you supposed to get the first appearance of Carnage for $15? And he's right. This video, or this book really has increased in value. In my original video, I think I quoted it for about $15, $20, something of the sort, and it definitely is not going for that price anymore. On eBay, I believe this book, when I was searching the listings, it was selling. Some of them were selling for up to $200, which was incredible. So it certainly has gone beyond that $100 threshold and no longer considered to be super affordable. Great book though. So that does it for the books that appeared in my original video that I'm now taking off the list. Let's now get into the super affordable key issues that I think should be in your collection. Most of these books are going to be between $1 and $20. There are a few exceptions, but I will point those out when we get there. Bear with me, this is going to be a little long, but I think it'll be worth it. There are about 55 books here, and I kind of want to give you a little bit of a blurb about each one of them. So our first book here is Alpha Flight, number 1. This is a great book. This is not the first appearance of Alpha Flight. Alpha Flight first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 120, but this is their first solo series. And if you don't know Alpha Flight, they're kind of the Canadian equivalent of the X-Men, which is very important to me because I am Canadian. And just a really great read and super affordable. This number 1 issue here on eBay was selling for about $5 to $10. Not very expensive. So worth it to have in your collection. Were I you though, I'd try to see if I could get this book as part of like a lot. Maybe you can see if you can get the first 5 to 10 issues in kind of a package deal. But nevertheless, even if you can't find a lot, it's still great as an individual issue, and it is a number 1, so number 1s definitely look great in a collection. Following that book, we have Batman number 497, and this is the famous breaking of the Bat issue. This image here is kind of ingrained in pop culture and will be ingrained in pop culture forever. It's been reproduced so many times, this image. It's been in Batman the Animated Series, and if you've seen The Dark Knight Rises, this scene also takes place in The Dark Knight Rises. This is just such an important book, and definitely one of the hot books of the 1990s. This is, I mean, a lot of people kind of pass it off as a gimmick book. I mean, it's a die-cut cover, and there was a little bit of that that profiteering that was going on by publishers in the early 1990s with all of this like special edition, superficial stuff to entice people to buy these books. But nevertheless, if you look beyond the superficial nature of the issue, I mean, it is just a great book to have in your collection. It's super cheap on eBay right now. I found listings for around $5 to $10, and so I mean, you really can't go wrong with this book. Also, this book here is part of the Batman Nightfall run, which was one of the most epic Batman story arcs that I have ever read. It's rather long, but it's super, super good. Definitely worth the read. Even if you don't get this book, you need to pick up the at least the Batman Nightfall trade paperback, because it is an amazing book. Our next book is another Batman book, and I promise I do have a great variety of books in this video. Just a lot of Batman and Spider-Man at the beginning. This is Batman number 655. This is the first appearance of Damian Wayne. For those of you that don't know, Damian Wayne is the son of Bruce Wayne, who eventually becomes the next Robin. When I was researching the eBay listings for this book, I was surprised at how much this book had gone up in value. I had purchased this book probably about 6-7 years ago, and I know I did not spend more than $10 on it. I believe I actually spent $5 on it. Now this book, I couldn't find it on eBay for less than $40. The cheapest, one of the cheapest listings I found was for about $40. Our next book, another Batman book, is Batman Shadow of the Bat #1, which is it is a #1. It is also the first appearance of the Batman villain Victor Zasz, and it is also the first appearance of Jeremiah Arkham. Both characters who have been made a little bit more popular in recent years due to the Batman Arkham games. This was one of the hot books from the 90s. Great read. I really recommend picking this one up. And on top of it, there's really no reason why this also shouldn't be in your collection, because it is super cheap. You likely could find this book in a bargain bin for $1.50. On eBay, this book was going for between $1 and $5. I definitely would not spend more than $5 on this book. Like I said, your best bet is to try a bargain bin. I think, I mean, just a testament to how cheap it is, I have 2 of them, and I actually think I have a third laying around somewhere. I just, every time I see them somewhere, I pick them up because they're super cheap. Like I said, I think I've spent maybe 50 cents each on these. They're not very expensive, but which I don't know why, kind of underrated this book, because it is the first appearance of two pretty popular characters. I mean, popular now anyway. But again, these books are a dime a dozen. They're all over the place, so that's probably why they're not worth more. Next, we have Detective Comics number 608. This is the first appearance of the Batman villain, Anarky. Anarky is actually one of my favorite villains. Love the character. I think he's very interesting. This book, another one that you should be able to pick up in a bargain bin. I picked this copy up in a bargain bin. I spent $1 on it. It was super cheap, and I was super ecstatic to find out later that this was the first appearance of Anarky. When I picked it up, I didn't even know it was the first appearance of Anarky, to tell you the truth. But like I said, to this day, you should still be able to find this book in a bargain bin. Our next book is one that is a little bit of an exception. It's quite a bit actually over the $20 price mark, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man number 96. And this book here is hugely significant. Right now on eBay, it is going for about $50 to $80. I didn't find any listings lower than $50 for this book, but this book, like I said, is a very significant piece of pop cultural history. This is the famous Amazing Spider-Man drug issue, and there's a little bit of a story behind this book. Back in the early 1970s, Stan Lee, who was writing Spider-Man at the time still, received a letter from, I believe it was the New York Health Department, and they had asked him to do a comic book story in one of their more popular Marvel comics, depicting the dangers of drugs. So Stan said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. So he wrote a pretty light story describing the dangers of drugs. Like, there's a kid in here who gets high, and he goes up to the top of a building, and he wants to jump off, and Spider-Man catches him, and then also Harry Osborn ends up on drugs in this issue. So what happened was, back in those days, all of the books that were going to be published had to be approved by the Comics Code Authority, which was a censorship body for comic books. And they rejected this story because in the code, comics were not allowed to have drugs. So Stan Lee called them and said, hey, I'm not telling kids to take drugs. I'm showing them the dangers of taking drugs. And they said, doesn't matter. You can't have drugs in the story. So Stan Lee was rightly upset and said, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to publish the book anyway. So for 3 months back in the 1970s, The Amazing Spider-Man was not published with the Comics Code seal of approval. As you see, the Comics Code seal of approval would usually be in this top portion of the comic book, and you could see that the Comics Code seal of approval is nowhere on this book. And that was huge in the 1970s because all books needed to be approved by the code. And Stan rebelled. He was being a rebellious one back then. But very, very important because this was kind of the first step in the Comics Code becoming more lax. Our next book is The Amazing Spider-Man number 136. This is the first appearance of Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin. The original Green Goblin was Norman Osborn, but he died in Amazing Spider-Man number 122, I believe. And then his son eventually took the mantle as Green Goblin, and his first appearance is in this issue. This appeared in my original video, and it was much cheaper back then. This seems to have gone up in value a little bit. And the range was actually rather was a rather huge range of prices that I was seeing for this book. Higher grades of this book were going for about $100, but you could find lower grade, like mid to lower grade copies of this book for about $30 and under, but on average they were about $30. Our next book is another Amazing Spider-Man book. Like I said, I have a lot of Amazing Spider-Man Batman at the beginning, but I have other books. I decided to do a lot of Spider-Man and Batman just because they're very popular characters that people usually like to collect. But anyway, I have Amazing Spider-Man number 210. This is the first appearance of Madam Web. Madam Web is a very, very cool cryptic character who has kind of been forgotten about a little bit in recent years. Madam Web, I know, played a huge role in the Spider-Man animated series from the early 1990s, and then after that, she kind of disappeared. I'm not really sure if she's appeared in anything else. Has appeared even very often since the animated series from the 90s. But anyway, she was a very, very cool character. I really liked her. This book here, you should be able to get for between $10 and $20. Very, very low priced issue. I personally got this book for $5 about 3 years ago. And so worth it to have in the collection. The Amazing Spider-Man number 252 is our next book. And I'm finally, once and for all, going to end the argument on this book. This was in my original video, and I wasn't really sure. I was kind of confused at what the significance was in this book, but I looked it up, and according to the CGC, this is the first full appearance of the famous black costume that eventually becomes Venom. This is one of those books, if you're a Spider-Man or a comic book fan at all, you need to get this book. It was in my original video, and I quoted it, I think, for around $30. This is one of those exceptions now that is in the $50 range. On average, this book on eBay was going for around $50. It is so worth it. You need to have this because when it comes to the 1980s in comic books, everybody right away thinks of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the whole Venom run and the black costume in Spider-Man. It was one of the most memorable runs of all time, and definitely one of the most memorable runs of the 80s. So you definitely need to get this book. I definitely would spend, even today, I would spend probably $50 on this book because it is just that iconic. Batman number 404, and this is the first issue in the very, very famous Frank Miller Batman Year One story arc. Another hugely famous story arc from the 1980s, and also considered to be one of the best Batman stories ever written. That's really what the significance is. It's just a great run. This book individually, I saw on eBay selling for around $30 to $40. Your best bet is to see if you can get the whole run, which is 4 issues, and I saw listings for the whole run for around, on average, $60. So it's definitely more worth it to get the whole run. But I mean, if you want the individual issue, I mean, expect to pay around $30 $40 for it. Our next book is our first non-Spider-Man or Batman book, and that is Wolverine Volume 2, Number 1. This is not the first Wolverine solo series. The first Wolverine solo series was earlier on in the 1980s, and that was also a Frank Miller work. And the first Wolverine Volume 1 there was only 4. It was a limited series, and it was meant to be a limited series. It was only 4 issues long. But this is the first ongoing Wolverine series, which debuted, I believe, in 1987. And this book has gone up in value a little bit, definitely one of those exceptions. In my original video, I believe I quoted it for around $30. On eBay now, I didn't find really any listings that were under $50. Another interesting tidbit about this book, CGC, according to them, this is also the first appearance of Wolverine as Patch. And Patch is just a character, it's basically who Wolverine is in disguise. Next, we have Wolverine Volume 2, Number 10. And as you could see, really cool cover with Wolverine and Sabretooth on the front. This was another of those books that in my original video I wasn't really sure what the significance was, but I've looked it up. According to CGC, this is the first Wolverine versus Sabretooth in the Wolverine solo series. I know that's getting very particular, but yes, you just really can't go wrong with this book. I mean, this is like an epic and historic rivalry right here in pop culture of Wolverine versus Sabretooth. You see them fighting all the time in the movies. They fought so many times in comic books. They just continue even to this day to be number one enemies, right? So iconic, this book, and definitely worth it to have in your collection. This book right here, on eBay, you could probably get it for around $20. Most of the listings were for around $20. I didn't really see anything under $20 for this book, and it really hasn't really changed in value in the last couple years. So you should still be able to get it rather cheap. X-Men Annual number 14 is our next book. This is the first cameo appearance of Gambit. Gambit, who is an extremely popular X-Man and was one of the most popular X-Men from during the 1990s. People just loved the character. This book here is very reasonably priced. On eBay, it was selling for around between $10 and $20. You likely will be able to find this book for around $10, and it's super worth it. It is technically the first appearance of a very popular X-Man. Super great. If you don't want to spend the money on Gambit's first full appearance, this definitely is a great alternative. Our next book is Batman Legends of the Dark Knight number 1, another iconic book from the 1990s. Super great read. I love this book, and it is very cheap. You should be able to still get this book for between $1 to $5. The eBay listings were not over $5. You might even get lucky and find this in a bargain bin. Again, this is one of those books that's a dime a dozen. There was a little bit of gimmicking going on with this book because they had multiple editions of this cover. The cover essentially is the same, but a lot of they were in different colors. So this one's yellow, another one's red. I think there's a blue one, probably a green one. It doesn't matter which one you get. They were all from the same printing, and they're all the same story. So I guess they just really wanted people to buy multiple colors of the cover. But nevertheless, great book. Another interesting tidbit here, it says it is the first new solo Batman book since 1940. At the time, it really was the first new solo Batman book since 1940, because I think at the time DC was only publishing Detective Comics and the self-titled Batman series, and then this one came along. So again, they were trying to stir up some speculation with this book, but nevertheless, great book to have in your collection. I don't really think there's any collection complete without this one. You really can't go wrong. It's super, super cheap. Next up, we have X-Men number 201. This is the first appearance of Cable as a baby. This book here, there's been a lot more attention being given to this book in recent years. I think because, again, there's been talk of Cable being in a movie. So if you don't want to spend the money on the first appearance of Cable, this is a great alternative. It's Cable as a baby. I'll let you figure out how Cable appeared as a baby and then was an old man. But yeah, this book here was in my original video. I think I originally quoted this book for about maybe $5-10. I know I spent, I think, maybe $5 on it. But now on eBay, it has gone up a little bit. It is now in the $15-20 range. I don't think I saw any really above $20 or $30. So you could still get this relatively cheap, but the prices are going up for this book. The next book is one of my favorites, and it is X-Men number 1 from 1991. This is the famous Jim Lee X-Men. This book here is super, super cheap. These things are a dime a dozen. You can get this likely still in a bargain bin. On eBay between $1 and $5. Really, really cheap. I would not spend more than $5 on this book. But no collection is complete without this book. If there is any book that you're going to get from this video today, you need to get this one. This is a great read, and it is a huge piece of pop cultural history. This book here, the reason why it's so hugely significant is not because it's an X-Men number 1 or Jim Lee. I mean, those are important too, but this book here actually holds the world record for the highest selling individual issue of a comic book series. It is estimated that 8.1 million copies of this book were sold. Now, mind you, they did release multiple editions of this one issue. I mean, different covers and everything. But at the end of the day, the fact that it sold that much was just astounding. And again, that was kind of fueled by the whole speculation bubble and all the speculation that was going on with comics in the early 1990s. But nevertheless, great book, great read. You need to get this book. Next up, from the same series, we have X-Men number 4. This is still the Jim Lee X-Men. This is just a great book. And I'm making a correction here. This is the first appearance of Omega Red. I wasn't sure in my original video if it was 4 or 5. But yes, this is the first appearance of Omega Red, who is slowly becoming more of a popular villain. This book used to be very, very cheap. You used to be able to get it in a back issue bin, bargain bin, but the price, people kind of got a clue, and the prices are going up for this book. It is now going on eBay for about $10 to $20. I don't think I saw any listings that were under $10, but so the prices are going up, but it's still a very, very affordable book. Next up is another X-Men book. That is X-Men number 5, still the Jim Lee X-Men from 1991 or 2. This is an Omega Red appearance, and it's also the first appearance of Maverick. I have read the book, but I don't really remember who Maverick is. Maybe you guys can kind of fill me in and remind me who he is again. But yeah, this is a great book. Another one that is on eBay going for between $10 and $20 right now. Your best bet with the Jim Lee X-Men is to just see if you can get maybe the first 10 issues in a lot package deal. You could probably get a good deal on them rather than buying each one individually. Next book we have on the list is Shazam #1, which is from the early 1970s. This book is also slowly going up in value. Back when I bought it originally about 6 years ago, I believe I spent $7 on it. Now on eBay, it is going for about $30. I don't think I found any listings cheaper than $30. This is not the first appearance of Shazam, or Captain Marvel as he was originally called, but I believe it is the first DC solo series of with Captain Marvel. It's actually kind of ironic that Captain Marvel and Superman are on the same cover here. There's actually a little bit of a story behind this book. You see, Captain Marvel made his first appearance back in, I believe it was 1940, in Captain Marvel Whiz Comics #1. He was originally published by a publisher called Fawcett Publications. And throughout the 1940s, there came a point where Captain Marvel was actually outselling Superman. Well, DC did not really like that. So what they did was they actually sued Fawcett Publications because they felt that this character was a little bit too similar to Superman, you know, with the black hair and the beefiness, and they just felt there were a lot of similarities. So they sued. It was a lengthy legal battle, but at the end of the day, DC Comics ended up getting the rights to Captain Marvel, and in the 1970s, DC Comics began publishing Captain Marvel in their own books. So yes, this is just a classic cover here with Superman and Captain Marvel. Next, we have Sleepwalker #1, which is an iconic 1990s comic. This is a very, very cheap book. You can likely get this book in a bargain bin if you're lucky. I know on eBay it was going for between $1 and $5. Not very, very expensive. There was a lot of speculation over Sleepwalker in the 1990s. I know speculators saw him as a promising character. They thought if they bought his book now that they likely would be able to flip the book for a profit in the future. That wasn't the case. There was a huge print run for this book, and at the end of the day, it is now cheap more than 20 years later. So, but still a great book to have in your collection. I really, really enjoy it, and it's a great read. You have to get it. Very, very underrated. Following that book, we have Nova #1. This is the first appearance of the superhero Nova. He debuted in the mid-1970s. Very, very cool character. Kind of created in the tradition of Spider-Man, and actually Marvel makes no apologies for that. At the top here it says, in the marvelous tradition of Spider-Man. A character very, very similar to Spider-Man. He's a teenager, not very popular at school. This guy does not get the greatest grades, and then he becomes a superhero. He gets these powers and becomes a superhero. But unlike most superheroes, he messes up at the beginning a lot. Like, he doesn't just get these powers and become amazing. It actually kind of shows him grow over the course of the series, which is great. Great book to have in your collection. Right now, you can get this book individually for about $30 to $40 on eBay. However, your best bet is to see if you can get maybe the first 10 issues or so in a lot kind of package deal. The Web of Spider-Man #1 is our next book. This was a book that debuted in the 1980s. According to CGC, this is the first appearance of the Vulturians, which are a gang that have the same sort of powers as the Vulture. At the same time, too, this is also a great read, even as an individual issue. This is the issue where Spider-Man goes into the bell tower, and with the noise of the bell, the black symbiote leaves his costume. It's a great read, great book. Still relatively cheap on eBay. It's ranging from between $10 and $20. Back when I got it, I think I got it for about $5 to $7 about 6 years ago. So it is slowly going up in value a little bit. Next, we have The Thing #1, which is, in my opinion, a super underrated book. This book has appeared in a lot of my other videos. I love this book. This is the first solo Thing series, I believe, and it's just great, and it's really not too expensive. A lot of the eBay listings had it for between $10 and $20. Has gone up in value a little bit. Back in my original video, I believe I quoted this book for between $5 and $10, but it has gone up a little bit. But still very affordable and great to have in any collection. Next, we have another favorite of mine, which is Spawn #1, another super hot book from the 1990s. This is Todd McFarlane, who was the rock star artist of the 1980s and 90s. And, you know, I have to say, when he first started writing, he was not that great, but I felt that his writing really got a lot better in Spawn, and he really came into his own as a writer in this series. I mean, he started writing in Spider-Man in 1991, and the stuff was okay, but I have to say that the stuff in Spawn #1 is just phenomenal. You need to get this book. Has gone up in value a little bit. I remember when I bought this book, I got it for about $5. Now it's going for, again, around $10, $20. But so still relatively affordable, and you just absolutely need this book. This book is another high-selling book of the 1990s. It is estimated that 1.8 million copies of this book sold. So hugely popular book. Our next book is a new edition, and that is Kull the Conqueror #1. This is the first appearance of Kull in Marvel. Kull the Conqueror was formerly, I believe, a pulp magazine hero that was created by a pulp writer named Robert E. Howard, and this is great. If you're into like sword and sorcery and Game of Thrones type thing, this kind of has that same feel. Definitely lighter than Game of Thrones, a lot lighter than Game of Thrones, but has that same feel. Really great. I really enjoyed Kull the Conqueror, and this book right now is still very relatively cheap. You can get it on eBay right now for around $10. Your best bet though is to see if you can get this in sort of a package deal, again with a lot. See if you can get maybe the first 5 issues. Next we have Kazar, what is it? I don't even know. I call him Kazar. I don't know. But anyway, #1. This is the first Kazar solo series. This is not the first appearance of Kazar. He appeared in the early 1960s, but he got his own series in the, I believe it was the early 1970s. Great book. Kind of like a Kull, you know, you got those kind of savage, you know, manly man type heroes here. Super great read. Really like this book. One of my more recent acquisitions. I think I bought this book maybe last year, and I got, I think, the first 20 issues for something like $60. It wasn't very expensive, but this book individually is going on eBay right now for about $10. So very affordable, and definitely worth it for the collection. Our next book is another one of my more recent acquisitions, and I definitely think it's one that you likely have not heard of. This is Skull the Slayer, and the reason why he's not a very well-known character is because he had his own comic book series in the mid-1970s for only about 7 months. This only ran for 7 issues. You see, Skull the Slayer, I thought, was a very promising character. This is a great read. I love this series. This is a Marv Wolfman creation, and Marv Wolfman was a heavy hitter at Marvel back in the 1970s. But I believe after 3 issues, he had to give up the writing duties for this book to someone else, and then after that, the book just never went anywhere. But it is just a great read. kind of has like a Kong Skull Island feel to it if you've seen that movie. Basically, it goes that the character is a Vietnam vet, and he's being transported in an airplane because he's going on trial for the murder of his brother, which he didn't actually murder his brother. Well, he did, but it was in self-defense. But anyway, they're flying over the Bermuda Triangle, and they get sucked in, and they go back in time, and they're going through all these different periods of time. It's really great. It's definitely worth to check it out. And this book is super, super cheap. I don't think there are a lot of them out there. I don't know if this had a very, very high print run, but it's a very cheap book. I bought it for $5, and on eBay right now it's going for between $5 and $10. If I were you though, I definitely would go splurge and see if you could just get all 7 issues. Next we have the another iconic 90s comic book. This is the Punisher War Xone. This was a huge book in the 1990s. Definitely a gimmick cover. It's one of those die cut covers. But at the end of the day, this is a great read. It's John Romita Jr. artwork, and you can get this on eBay for about $5 to $10. Not very, very expensive. Very, very affordable. And just a great book. Our next book is an important one. It is Youngblood #1. This is, folks, not only a #1, but it is the first ever published Image Comics book. Image Comics was huge in the 1990s. They were an independent publisher, and they were known for letting the creators and the writers own the characters that they created, and they were just huge in the 1990s. This book here, this is Rob Liefeld work. I think he wrote in and drew it, and did the art here. It's an okay read. I guess that arguably it was okay for me. It wasn't the greatest read, but it's definitely great to have in your collection because it is the first Image Comics book, and it's super, super cheap. You're likely able to find this in a bargain bin for $1, maybe $2. Definitely would not spend more than $5 on this book though. Deathmate Red. Wow, I cannot say enough about this book. It is one of those controversial books from the 1990s. There's a great video on YouTube that talks about how this book was instrumental in the crash of the comic book collector's market, and I could see why too. I won't go into much detail about what happened with this book because we still have quite a few other books to go, but that's why I have it in my collection, just because of the controversial nature of it. And it was one of those books from the 1990s that everyone will remember if they were around reading comics in the 1990s. As a story though, before I move on, I just want to say, as story and art value, complete crap. Have no idea what's going on. I think I've tried reading this series because there are multiple there are a few books in this series here. I have no idea what the heck is going on in this book. Do you understand this book? Please tell me. If you've read Deathmate Red or the whole Deathmate series, and you understand what is going on in this book, please, please, please leave me a detailed comment, because I have no freaking idea what is going on here. I don't really think there's a plot. There doesn't seem to be a plot in this book. You read the prelude to it. The prelude made sense. It really did. But then the successive issues made no sense. So I don't know. But this book here is super, super cheap. Please do not spend more than $1 on it. If you do, you're getting ripped off. Do not spend more than $1 on it. I would spend $1 on it. Definitely worth $1, but definitely would not spend more. Next, we have one of the great books from the 1980s. This is X Factor. According to CGC, this is the first appearance of X Factor. If you don't know what X Factor is basically the old X-Men team that appeared in the 1960s, reunited again. You see, the X-Men went through a lot of changes in the 70s and 80s. If you read X-Men in the 1960s, then you stopped reading them, and then you picked them up again in the 1980s, the team would be unrecognizable to you. They were completely different in the 1980s. So basically what Marvel Comics did, I think they had a lot of requests to kind of bring the old team back together. So that is what essentially they did with X Factor. And I have to say, this is a solid read, great book, and not very expensive. I saw this, you could get on eBay, this book is going for between $5 and $10. You might be able to get it cheaper if you're lucky, but definitely worth to spend $5 or $10 on this book. Our next book is X-Force #1, another hugely popular book from the 1990s. Earlier on, I told you that X-Men #1, the Jim Lee X-Men, holds the record for the most issues, or sorry, the most copies of an individual issue ever sold. This book here holds second place. It is estimated that 5 million copies of this particular issue were sold in the early 1990s, which is astounding. This is Rob Liefeld work again. As a read, I didn't care for it too much as a read. It was okay. This book here took the place of the New Mutants. So the New Mutants ended, and then this book took over. These books came in poly bags and everything. I did not keep the book in a poly bag. I think I have about 3 copies of this book, just because I got them in lots and things like that. And I have to say, I took them all out of the poly bags. They came with little trading cards and everything. Interesting tidbit about those poly bags that the books come in. Those poly bags there are not acid free. So essentially the poly bags that they come in are damaging the book. So that's why I decided to rip open the poly bag and just put the cards in with my own acid free poly bag. And I would recommend you do the same. This book is super cheap. I would not spend more than $1 on it, but you likely could get it between $1 and $5. Again, this is another one of those books that is essential to any comic book collection because it is just so cheap and it is just so iconic. Even if the read is not that great, still an iconic book. Next up, we have X-Force #2. And this book here, I was so taken aback by this book here. This used to be a back issue bin stinker. It was one of those bottom feeder comics. Nobody wanted it. You used to be able to find it in those like bargain bins for 50 cents. Like, it just had a huge print run. No one really cared. But then, in recent years, people started paying a lot more attention to it. And that is because this book here is the second appearance of Deadpool. Currently, this book on eBay, I saw it going for between $5 and $10, which is definitely an improvement from the like 50 cents to $1 that it was worth even like say 15 years ago. But yeah, I even walked into some comic shops recently trying to sell this book, no lie, for $50, some for $30, which in my opinion is profiteering. This book, do not spend $30 or $50 on this book. It is not worth it, trust me. But 5 or 10, yeah, maybe. I think that might be good. If you're lucky, if you are lucky, you just might find it in a bargain bin. Might. I'm not saying you will, but I mean, $5, $10, yeah, might be worth it for this book. Second appearance of Deadpool, right? If you can't afford the first appearance, go for the second appearance. Next, we have Cable #1. This is the first Cable solo series. This one here debuted in, I think, 1993. I don't really have much to say about this book. It is the first Cable solo series. It's an okay read. Cover looks really pretty with all the gold foil there. But other than that, not worth a whole lot of money. You likely can get this book for between $5 and $10 on eBay right now. Maybe less if you're lucky. Next, we have X-O Man-O-War #1. This is a Valiant Comics book. X-O Man-O-War was another popular character in the 1990s. Valiant was also a, not as big as Image, but Valiant was another one of those creator-owned independent publishers. But yeah, this book got some attention, and in recent years it has gone up in value a little bit. I think there's been talk of a X-O Man-O-War movie, and I think that's what's kind of speculating a little bit of a rise in price here for this book. On eBay right now, this book's going for an average of $30. Our next book is X-O Man-O-War #0. I haven't even bagged and boarded this yet because I haven't read it. But this here is the only reason why I have this in the video is because it's one of those iconic 90s covers. As you can see, it's very shiny and purdy and all that. And this is, I think, Joe Quesada artwork. Just a really kind of a cool cover. This book right now is very cheap. It had a huge print run. There's a lot of speculation, obviously, with this book because of the pretty shiny cover, and you should be able to get this in a bargain bin for $1. Probably would not spend more than $5 on it though, because it is there are a lot of them out there for sure. Next up, we have Batman number 428, and this is the death of the Jason Todd Robin. This was a hugely popular book in the later 1980s. This actually, I believe, was one of the first comic books to be covered in mainstream media and mainstream news. The news back in the late 1980s could not believe that DC Comics would actually kill Robin. Like, there can be no Batman without Robin. It was just, people couldn't believe that DC Comics would do that. But people, the reason why there was so much there's so much of a kerfuffle about this book is because people thought that DC had killed the Dick Grayson Robin, but this is the Jason Todd Robin. This is a great run. This is a 4-issue run. Super great read. You need to read it. And the other thing that is super interesting about this book is at the end of the book, they have 2 1/900 numbers. And they left it up to the readers to decide if Jason Todd made it or not. And a lot of people voted, and at the end of the day, the readers voted to kill Jason Todd, which is exactly what DC did. This book right now is going for about $30 to $40 on eBay individually, but where I try to get all 4 issues of this story arc in a lot package deal. All 4 issues right now on eBay, I saw listings going from as low as $80 and as high as $100. This, if you're a Batman fan, this is essential. Even if you're not going to get the original issues, get the trade paperback, because this is a great read. So here we go. Here's what the end of that the one comic looks like. I made a mistake. 428 does not have this this 1/900 number. That's 427. That's why you should get the whole series to kind of see it. But here it says, Robin will die because the Joker wants revenge, but you can prevent it with a telephone call. So they have 2 numbers there. You dial one number if you want him to live, and another one if you want him to die. And sorry to spoil it for you, but the people voted dead. Next, we have Batman number 442. So, of course, Jason Todd dies, and Batman has no Robin, and we all know that Batman cannot exist without a Robin. So, a handful of issues later, they bring Tim Drake as the new Robin. And in my original video, I wasn't sure what the significance of this issue was. This is not the first appearance of Tim Drake, but this is the first appearance, according to CGC, this is the first appearance of Tim Drake in a Robin costume. Super cheap book right now, great to have in your collection. You can get it for between $5 and $10. Our next book is Batman number 363. This is the first appearance of a character called Nocturna. Pretty cheap book right now, going for as low as $10, so definitely great to have in the collection. Okay, our next book is another one that appeared in my original video, and I wasn't really sure what the significance was of this book. I wasn't sure if this was, I think I originally said this was the first appearance of Tim Drake in a Robin costume or something. It's actually not that. I know a lot of viewers corrected me on that, and thank you. But I searched on CGC, and this is the first appearance of Tim Drake as Robin. And I do remember that from reading 442. Even though he appears in the Robin costume on the cover, I don't think he actually appears as Robin in the issue. This is where he actually does appear as Robin for the first time. Cheap book right now. You can get this also for between $5 and $10, maybe even lower if you're lucky. but I definitely would not spend more than $10 on this book. This is Batman number 358. This was another one of those that I wasn't sure what the significance was in my previous video. According to CGC, this is the first Killer Croc cover, and you're probably looking at this and you're like, where is Killer Croc? All I see is some guy in a trench coat with a machine gun. But this is Killer Croc. It is the first appearance. It is the first Killer Croc cover with his face covered. Again, that's getting pretty specific, but this book here is still great to have in the collection. Killer Croc appears in the issue before this. I do not have that book. Really wish I did. I'm still looking for it right now. I can't seem to find it. But yeah, so I'm really happy to have this book here. If you're lucky, you could probably get this book for about $30-$40 on eBay. If you're lucky, you might be able to get it for lower, but at the time I checked eBay, they were averaging around $30-$40. Next, we have this is X Factor number 5, and this is the first cameo appearance of Apocalypse. And as we know, Apocalypse has become a very popular villain in recent years because of the X-Men Apocalypse movie, which was a great movie, by the way. Yeah, so not very expensive book. This is another one of those that's in the $30 to $40 range. Of course, the first full appearance of Apocalypse is the next issue, which is issue number 6. That one's a little bit more expensive, so I didn't include it on this list. But if you don't want to spend the money on the first full appearance, the cameo is always the next best thing. Next, we have the New Mutants number 1. This is a great read, great book to have in your collection. This is an early 1980s book, and very reasonably priced. You likely, the eBay listings I saw had this book going for between $10 and $20. If you're lucky, you might be able to still find it for $5. This is actually a really undervalued book, in my opinion. You really can't go wrong with the New Mutants. New Mutants is the series that introduced us to Cable and Deadpool, of course, way later on in the series. But don't write off those earlier stories in the New Mutants. I mean, they were really great. I really enjoyed it, and it's a super affordable book. This is not the first appearance of the New Mutants, but it is the first New Mutants solo series. Daredevil number 181 will be our next book. This is the Death of Elektra. This is Frank Miller work. If you don't know, Frank Miller introduced Elektra in the early 1980s, who was a character that everyone absolutely loved, and they even fell in love with her, really. Then, I think it was about 15 issues later, or 10 issues later, or something of the sort, he decides to kill her off. And that happens in this book. Do not have the first appearance of Elektra on this list, just because it's a little bit more expensive. But this book, which is The Death, is the next best thing. And this book right now on eBay is currently going for about $20 to $30, which is still a very affordable price for a Death issue. Now, of course, in comics, we know that deaths are to be taken with a grain of salt, because almost always the characters always return. But I mean, still, these deaths, I mean, they really had huge pop cultural impact when they happened. Next is the Amazing Spider-Man number 134. This is the first appearance of a villain called the Tarantula. He's not a hugely popular villain in like Spider-Man media, like the movies and things like that, but in the Spider-Man comics, he was rather popular. I know he made a lot of appearances throughout the Amazing Spider-Man series, and he also made appearances in the Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man. Really happy to have this book. Not too expensive on eBay. It's going for between $20 and $30. If you are lucky, you likely could get it for less. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 1 is our next book, and this is one of my favorite books in my collection here. Just a great classic cover, very much reminiscent of the Amazing Spider-Man number 134, which is the first appearance of the Tarantula. As you can see, they're very similar there in the way they are laid out. But this is just Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man is a super great book. I love it. Great read. My reasoning behind this is, if you can't afford the Amazing Spider-Man #1, which is a super expensive book, you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars, this is the next best thing. And to tell you the truth, this book here, for being a book that came out in 1976 and being a Spider-Man book, pretty affordable. This book here is on eBay going right now for around $30 on average. Didn't find any listings for any less than 30, but this book is so worth every penny that you pay for it. This is another one of those books that I'm going to tell you today. If of all the books that I'm listing here today, this is another one that you need to go out and get. It's just great. Next, we have Spider-Man #1. Wow, this is a hugely significant comic. There was so much hype about this book in 1991 when it came out. Not only because it's a Spider-Man #1, but because it's a Todd McFarlane cover. It's a very cool cover. And this book here is very affordable. This is the silver edition of this book. Like many books in the early 1990s, they released multiple editions of this particular issue. This is the silver. There's also the newsstand edition of this, which is actually worth a little bit less. You might be able to get that one for $1. Then there's the gold edition and the platinum edition. Now, the gold and platinum editions, of course, are going to be a little bit more expensive. The platinum edition being super expensive. But why spend the extra money? They're the exact same. The content is the same. Like, the story in there is the same. You're just really paying more for a different cover. So the silver edition is kind of like the middle of the road, and middle of the road copy, and you definitely can get it for a very affordable price. Our next book is, oh my goodness, Action Comics #1. No, this is not the Action Comics #1. This is actually the 50th anniversary edition of Action Comics #1, which came out in 1988. Great book to have, really cheap. I got this book for about, I think, $7 or something, and I bought it about like 5 or 6 years ago. And actually, I think I might have even gotten it for less now that I think of it, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, on eBay right now, it's still pretty cheap. You can get it for around $10. Very affordable. It's always great to have the first appearance of Superman in your collection in one way or another. As we know, Superman is the progenitor of the modern day superhero. Every single superhero that exists nowadays is like Superman in one way or another. He is the grandfather. This is the grandfather of every single superhero comic ever. This is where all superhero pop culture and geekdom all really kind of started, was with this one book. So obviously, most of us cannot afford an original Action Comics #1. So this is the next best thing. And I'm telling you, I was very much in awe reading the Superman's first adventure. It was very cool. I really wish I had access to some more of Superman's earlier adventures. I might have to see if I can get my hands on them through trade paperbacks. Our next book is Crisis on Infinite Earths #7. This is a new addition to the list. This is one of the most iconic comic book covers of the 1980s. This is also the death of Supergirl, and by many considered to be the end of the Bronze Age of comics and the beginning of the modern age. You know, they kind of interpret this as being that shift to very dark stories. And I kind of agree with people who consider this to be the end of the Bronze Age. I mean, death happened in comics before this, but I mean, here you could see it's just like Superman is distraught, and I mean, look at her, she's beaten and battered, and like I mean, being a kid back then, seeing this, like, I would have been kind of scared. And if I were a parent back then, I'd be a little bit concerned about my kid reading this too. I mean, comics got increasingly darker over the years, and after this book came out and The Dark Knight Returns came out by Frank Miller, just the market was flooded with books that were as dark as this, and even darker. So definitely worth to have in your collection. Again, this is another piece of pop cultural history right here, and right now you can get this book on eBay for about $20-$30. Definitely very, very affordable and worth it. Next up, we have Crisis on Infinite Earths number 8. This here is the death of the Barry Allen Flash. Another hugely popular 1980s book, and it was part of one of the most memorable limited series and runs in the 1980s. I have to say, Crisis on Infinite Earths was not my favorite story, but I know a lot of people who like it. I didn't care for it a lot, but nevertheless, I'm still very happy to have this in my collection. Let me know, did you like Crisis on Infinite Earths? You know, leave a comment, let me know. X-Men number 137. This is the death of the Phoenix. Those of you who are X-Men fans probably know that in the 70s, the Phoenix saga was one of the most memorable story arcs, and this here is the issue in which the Phoenix dies. So if you are an X-Men fan, this is an essential book to have. Right now it is going on eBay for around $30 to $40, which is still a pretty affordable price for this book. X-Men number 141. This is a very, very significant book. Great cover. I've seen t-shirts with this cover actually on it. And this is the famous Days of Future Past story arc in X-Men. It was only a 2-issue run, but it definitely left a lasting impact on fans. And you know, just because it was an iconic story arc warrants it a spot in your collection. This book alone is about $40. I was seeing listings on eBay for about $40, but you really should just get both of them together. I saw listings for both of them together for about $80, and which is still relatively affordable for such an iconic story arc. Next, from the early 1980s, we have King Conan. And this is definitely not the first appearance of Conan the Barbarian in Marvel Comics, and it is definitely not his first solo series, but still a great book to have, because if you can't afford the first issue of the original Conan the Barbarian Marvel series from the early 1970s, which is rather expensive now, you're talking between $300 to $500. This is the next best thing, and I haven't read this one yet, but I'm really excited to. And I mean, I'm a pretty big fan of Conan the Barbarian, so I'm really excited to see what this book is like. And I mean, not very, very expensive either on eBay. This book was going for around $5 to $10, so very, very affordable. Next, we have The Amazing Spider-Man number 90, which is the famous death of Captain Stacy, who was the father of Gwen Stacy, which we all know was Spider-Man's first girlfriend before she was killed by the Green Goblin. Well, indirectly killed by the Green Goblin. So another kind of piece of pop cultural history here. We had the death of the death of Captain Stacy happen in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, which I absolutely love. So I mean, we've seen it on film before, and this is just a great book to have in the collection, and not a very expensive book, considering that it is a death issue. This book right now on eBay is going for between $15 and $20, and if you're lucky, you might be able to get it for lower. So definitely check this one out. Our last book here is The Amazing Spider-Man number 144. You're probably wondering what the significance is of this. This is part of the original Clone Saga. Everybody knows the Spider-Man Clone Saga of the 1990s, which was a notoriously long story arc that people, even to this day, still love to hate on. But most people don't know that before that Clone Saga, there was an original Clone Saga, and that is this one here. And I mean, I still have not read this one yet. I'm really excited to see what it's like. But from what I hear, it is a lot better than the 1990s Clone Saga. And on eBay right now, it's still going for relatively low price, $15, $20. So very, very affordable. So there you have it. If you are still watching right now, kudos to you. I know that was a very, very long video, but I hope you enjoyed it. And let me know, are there any other super affordable key issues that you think should be on this list? If there are, please let me know in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please go down there, and subscribe. Just do it. Just do it. Go click right now. Go click right now. Subscribe. And because now I will be posting weekly videos. So till next time, this is Dante D signing off. Ciao.